Well, hello, folks. Welcome back to the Two Stewards Show, or just welcome to the Two Stewards Show if this is your first time listening. If it is your first time listening, I recommend you don't start with this episode. Go back a few. But in any case, my name's Mark. I'm one of your hosts. I'm here with Brent.
Hello, everybody.
And
today we're super excited to talk about Bitcoin's energy consumption. And
Brent's always super excited.
Mark just called me a nerd.
I'm not wrong.
Okay, yeah, that's true. That's true. When you wake up in the morning, you get excited to talk about Bitcoin's energy consumption. Yeah, you might be a nerd.
We're being nerds so that you don't have to.
There you go.
There you go.
New slogan, Mark.
Yeah, we'll put it on the T-shirts. You know, nerds for the world or something. I don't know. We'll think of a slogan. In any case, I want to talk about energy use of Bitcoin. This is one of the arguments that we hear sometimes about, oh, well, Bitcoin isn't, we don't like it because of the energy use. And, well, I mean, if you don't want to listen to the rest of the episode, totally ridiculous, wrong, and, you know, everything's fine.
And go find a different podcast.
But if you want to listen, we have our arguments are slightly more well-reasoned than that. But
yeah.
We should first talk about about how Bitcoin is mined, right? There's basically two trains of thought and two ways that you can mine, and I don't want to. So Bitcoin is not a cryptocurrency. It's on its own, but you have Bitcoin and you have cryptocurrencies. So pretty well every cryptocurrency uses what's called proof of stake.
Oh man!
Versus
we are just jumping right into this.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, it's important to understand because Bitcoin uses to mine it a lot more energy than, say, a cryptocurrency like Ethereum or Solana or whatever, because Bitcoin is proof of work. So
yeah, so the criticism there is that,
Yep.
hey, Bitcoin, look at all these other cryptos. They don't use nearly as much energy. So why are you using so much energy? And why is that important? And is that, like, that's, first of all, a massive cost. It's also a massive cost on the planet. Is that worth it for the use of, or like for Bitcoin to exist? Or why would I just not use a different cryptocurrency that's way less impact on the environment, way cheaper to produce? Why use proof of work? Oh man, this is we're already going in the weeds here.
Well, yeah, so there's a few things that we should unpack as we move through this. So one of those is, you mentioned the impact on the environment, right? And the idea that energy use has an impact on the environment. So is that actually true?
Well, because this news article I have up here from Forbes says,
oh, well, if it's in the news, it must be true, Brent.
Why does Bitcoin use so much energy? Maybe that's a good fundamental question to ask, because I think a lot of people ask that question, especially when they realize or they learn that Bitcoin uses as much energy as a small country, for example.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, well, this crazy cryptocurrency on the internet uses as much energy as that entire country. Is that good? Like, why does it use so much? And is it worth it?
Yeah. Yeah, okay, it's a fair question, right? Uses more than Now, so number one, there's not actually accurate measurements of how much energy that Bitcoin uses. And typically, I mean, you know, if you look at the sources, typically they are, I don't know, a little biased, shall we say?
Yeah.
Right? So that would be at the high end of energy usage because, so first of all, most of the energy use of Bitcoin comes through mining, through actually finding or producing, if you will, the actual coins.
So on a high level, how does mining actually work?
So you got...
quickly, like Mark style, quick kind of response.
That doesn't go together, Mark style and quick. No, you've got data centers. You have mining rigs. They call them mining rigs, but they're computers.
Yeah. With
specialized cards. So it used to be you would use like a graphics card.
Yeah.
And now they're slightly more specialized for, specifically for mining. But it's essentially a card that uses like a component in a computer that does the heavy cryptographic work, that does the mathematical calculations that are required to mine a Bitcoin or to mine sats. So that uses a lot of energy. So if you think of, if you've got a video game rig or a computer that is optimized for video gaming, and this is kind of where people realize, like, oh, hey, we can use graphics cards, right? Graphics card uses the most energy in your whole computer. And like, it's a big component.
Like the fans
it gets
buzzing.
Really hot.
Yeah,
it gets super hot because it's doing a ton of work to render all these graphics, right? And as games get more complex and the ability to produce content becomes more intense, and therefore, in order to reproduce that video on the screen, you need something more like stronger, more efficient, and that means it's also going to use more energy.
Yeah.
So they have big fans, liquid cooling in computers, right?
Yeah.
Gaming rigs can cost like a fair amount of money, and people build their own, right? It's a whole thing. But anyways, so if you think of a whole bunch of gaming computers, essentially,
together.
Yeah,
well,
together.
They call them ASICs, right? So application-specific integrated circuit. So you could think of like a purpose-built computer just to do one task. Like it's application-specific. So this computer would be useless at anything else other than doing this one task. So for a gaming computer, it might be good at rendering the game images on the screen. For a Bitcoin mining machine, it's purpose-built technology just to run the Bitcoin code. That's essentially optimized for that application.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'm just thinking, like, there would be other applications probably, though, and I don't really know much about this, but you could turn that to some other kind of I don't know, like cryptography or something, if we had to decode like an Enigma machine like they did in World War II, right? Anyways, that's neither here nor there. But so you typically have big data centers, right, where people are doing crypto mining,
consuming a ton of electricity.
Yeah, lots of electricity, and
it's an easy thing to point the finger at, or not the finger, a finger at. Say, look, hey, you guys are using up all the electricity in this entire country. Why are you doing that? What are you producing? What is the point of this? I can't even hold Bitcoin in my hand.
Exactly.
What's going on here?
Exactly. So, there's a few things we should talk about. How much energy does Bitcoin mining use?
Just to kind of quantify it.
Yeah, and you have, the Bitcoin network as well, like the Lightning Network, but the amount of energy that uses is negligible because it's just, if you hook up a computer, then you can run a node, you can do Bitcoin transactions. So mining is where it really, really comes in. So
you would kind of compare the second layer network stuff to like a banking app on your phone.
Yeah.
Right. Like everybody has an app on their phone. It's not consuming more energy than your banking app.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
so
exactly. So estimates are, low end from, I think, 60 terawatt hours to 240 terawatt hours. So that's a broad estimate. A number that is thrown out a lot is 127 terawatt hours per year of energy for Bitcoin mining. So I think that's probably high because typically, if you're looking to figure out the energy usage, well, you're going to, let's look up like some available information. So data centers, for example, that are using a lot of energy. And then you multiply that by the amount of Bitcoin mining and there's your answer. So the estimates are varied, right? There's, I think Galaxy, which is sort of a crypto kind of company, estimated at 114 terawatt hours.
Yeah, this article says 127 terawatt hours.
Yeah.
To be honest, I don't know what a terawatt hour actually means, but this article says that usage exceeds the entire annual electricity consumption of Norway.
Yeah. So it's interesting. If you Google energy usage of Bitcoin, those are the two things you see all the time. So that tells me there's not a lot of original research. Somebody at some point did a study and said it's 127 terawatt hours.
Yeah.
And that's more than Norway.
Yeah.
Like that's just our news sector, right?
Yeah.
You get one thing and then everybody uses that. There's no original research. So anyways, even if we just go with that and I'd say that's a high number, but okay, fine. That's what we do. So total global energy usage, and the last figure I could find, I think was from 2022, is about 180,000 terawatt hours. So, you don't need to know what a terawatt hour is, but that's how many we use worldwide, at least in 2022. So 180,000. So air conditioning, for example, is estimated to use about 10% of global energy usage worldwide. So that would be 18,000 terawatt hours.
Just to keep people cool.
Well, so
while they run their Bitcoin miners.
Hey, you know
that's really spiked since Bitcoin mining.
Yes, and I don't know. Some of that is for air conditioning and data centers, but we don't question that, right? And we understand the benefits to air conditioning because prior to the 1950s, air conditioning wasn't widely available.
Yeah.
Right. So you've had countries in hot climates that have benefited immensely from air conditioning, right? So look at Singapore in 1940 versus now.
Yeah.
Huge difference. And the big reason is they have air conditioning. So they can actually have like a white collar sector that can go to work and do stuff and be productive because they can sit in an office building for 8 hours or 10 hours a day.
Be just sweating profusely the entire time.
Because it wouldn't make sense before then to do that, right? You just didn't have those industries, and now super wealthy.
So I guess the question is the cost of the electricity worthwhile for society, right? Like, it's a trade-off. It's more energy consumption, but energy consumption equals human flourishing, right?
Exactly. And so there's another thing that we'll have to address, not right now, but there's the implicit idea. Right now? I mean, I will.
All right, let's do it.
No, we'll get back to it. But no, the implicit idea that more energy usage is bad.
Yeah.
Right? And I mean, if as Dutch people, we probably agree, like, turn down the heat, turn off the lights. Right, yeah, because you're paying for it, so you don't want to pay more than you need to.
Yeah.
So in that sense, sure, but that kind of gets moved over to the idea, and this is really from the environmental movement, and we've talked about this before. Like, we're going to run out of resources, so we have to conserve what we have. Right? We talked about peak oil theory, Paul Ehrlichman, and we're going to run out of resources and everything else, and we just keep finding more and more and more
energy. And oil, more resources.
More resources, more sources of energy, and then more efficient ways to use those energy. Yeah. So the idea that we have to use less energy, that humans have to use less, that we should actually have less humans because that would use less energy and have less of an impact on the earth. Right?
It's crazy.
This is, it's all from the environmental movement.
Which is funded by printed money out of thin air.
Yeah, interesting, right?
Not based in reality at all.
But I don't know if we need to hammer that too much more, but it's important to look to examine the root questions and the root causes of a lot of these statements, right? So is more energy usage bad? And so my argument is no.
Yeah.
We need more energy usage. We need to be more efficient with it. Yeah. But we talked last episode, I talked about the Industrial Revolution and how that lifted many, many, many people out of poverty.
Yeah.
Right? And the key thing there, the key ingredient was energy
consumption.
Yeah. The widely available
Well, if you think about it,
energy.
Human beings are just going around trying to find energy. Like we consume food, that's energy, right?
Yep.
So we're trying to produce more energy dense fuels, more energy dense foods, right? That, like we get more bang for our buck essentially with everything we do, right?
Yeah.
What's a good example? Like a horse-drawn carriage versus a car. Right?
I have never seen a horse draw anything, by the way. Like they have hoofs. They can't even hold a crayon. I'm not sure where people get this idea, but
a horse-pulled carriage.
Oh, okay, yeah.
You've seen those all over the place.
Yeah, I've seen those.
In your neighborhood.
Yeah.
See, in your neighborhood, they don't agree with energy consumption. But the energy that the horse is consuming to pull the carriage,
Yeah.
it's still consuming energy, right? It's just very low amounts of energy. It's like oats, and they eat that, and then they drink water, and they like have a certain amount of energy, and they can go for so long, and then they got to sleep and eat again.
Measured in horsepower.
Yeah. And now we measure it in what?
Terawatt hours.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So more energy consumption equals human flourishing. I think that's important to say 10 times really fast until you actually memorize.
Okay, everybody, that's your assignment. If you have a chalkboard, right? I want you to write lines. Write it on there.
Increased energy consumption equals human flourishing. I don't know. Can you debunk that statement?
No, I
You agree with it.
agree with it. So why
Shoot,
would I
we both
debunk
agree.
it?
Yeah, this is kind of a boring podcast.
No, but it's true, right?
Yeah.
When everything depended on animals as your primary source of energy or your primary source of like industrial capacity, right? If you were, I don't know, think about it. We love mills. On the Two Stewards podcast,
Yeah.
right? But if you think of a mill, right, you can have a horse or an ox or something walking around in a circle grinding your wheat. And then, somebody figured out, hey, we can use wind energy or we can use water energy. We'll have a windmill or a water mill and use that to grind the stone. And it's more efficient. You can run it longer.
Way more of it.
Yeah, you can do more of it. Like
So if energy consumption is good and it contributes to human flourishing, then maybe the question is the energy consumed being used toward a worthwhile thing, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's one thing, you consume a lot of energy and we can do things more efficiently. But if the things that we're doing more efficiently with increased energy consumption are like totally useless,
like scrolling Facebook.
yeah, or, supporting the fiat system, then is that a worthwhile use of that energy, right? So maybe that's another criticism that we can look at, because I think we're on the same page here that energy consumption in general leads to human flourishing. So that's good. Okay, well, if Bitcoin uses a lot of energy, that's not necessarily a bad thing. But if Bitcoin is worthless,
Then that's a bad thing.
Yeah, then it's a ton of energy being spent on something useless. So one way to do that maybe is to compare Bitcoin, which is striving to be, like, it's invented to be a new monetary technology to replace other monies. So if you look at other monies, let's compare what Bitcoin's trying to be versus gold or silver or fiat or other monetary technologies that have been used in history to say, okay, well, how much energy do those other ones use? Is it more or less? And what is the result? Like, are they actually, producing a stable system that we can rely on? Does Bitcoin offer something different?
It wouldn't be a stable system. We already talked about this. We're not using horses anymore.
Oh, man. How many coffees did you have?
None yet.
Oh, shoot.
Okay, so yeah, that's a good point. So, banking system, and this is a very rough estimate because it's hard to figure that out.
Yeah.
Excuse me, but somebody has estimated. Let's see if I can actually pull this up instead of just saying.
Get the glasses on, because I don't want you to misread that.
Yeah, has estimated that the banking system. I don't know. Maybe I lost the article now, but anyways, estimates that the banking system uses about 240 terawatt hours per year. And so that's from like ATMs, banks, data centers. And I mean, data centers are probably going to be the biggest energy use in the banking sector, right?
What is that, 2 times Bitcoin or no? Same, less?
Yeah, roughly.
Okay.
If you believe all the numbers. And so, yeah, if we just say, sure, that's what the numbers are. So that's Galaxy again.
And this book says
Galaxy
in
Digital.
2014, gold production, so 10 years ago, gold production was 132 terawatt hours.
Yeah, so now estimated at 240.
Right.
Now, that's just straight mining, right?
Yeah,
so somebody
just the
pointed
mining.
out, like, okay, so Barrick Gold uses something like 250,000 rubber tires per year for like their mining trucks and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Like, that's not captured in that, right?
Yeah.
All these sort
the
of
environmental impact of digging a massive hole in the earth and pulling out gold. Like,
yeah, and then what
that
about
has
all the
been
machinery?
deemed worthwhile
There's
by
energy used to make all that machinery. There's,
Yeah,
there's oil oil extraction, to make the tires, to make the machine, all this stuff that's not captured by that, right?
Man.
But I guess you could make the same argument for like
Bitcoin,
a Bitcoin rig. You have to
but
build
with
the
Bitcoin,
rigs.
there's kind of like, there's the technology, like the computer systems that it uses, and then there's electricity and an internet connection. So you're not going out and digging holes in the earth. You're not, enforcing some sort of geographical area with the military in order to preserve your fiat currency. You're actually just putting a bunch of computers in a box, making sure they're running and at the right temperature or whatever, and connected to the internet, and then you're good to go.
Yeah.
So the other thing you need is electricity, which is really interesting because I think this book says 74%.
What's the book, Brent?
The Bullish Case for Bitcoin. So you can see which way this book is leaning.
Not biased
VJ
at all.
Boyapati. We got to have him on the podcast, along with Michael Saylor and some other guys, just to see if these guys are legit. But this is saying that a conservative estimate of the renewables penetration in the energy mix powering the Bitcoin mining network is 74.1%. This is like a few years ago. So that's saying that Bitcoin seeks energy that is renewable to the tune of 74%.
So that's an interesting point to bring up, right? What kind of energy is Bitcoin using? So if you've got a data center in like the middle of the state somewhere, it's using electricity from the grid.
Yeah.
But that's expensive. And so if you're a Bitcoin miner, especially like a big, like Marathon or some of these bigger companies, you're looking for cheap electricity.
That'll give you an edge over your competition. If you got the cheapest electricity, you're going to be the most profitable Bitcoin mining.
Yeah, exactly. Because when you mine, and most mining companies sell their Bitcoin, because that's the business model, right? You mine it, you sell it, and the difference in what it costs to mine it versus what you sold it for is your profit. Yeah. And some of them will keep some, but generally speaking, they're selling it. So, you have to get the absolute lowest cost per unit to mine that. And there's so many innovative things that people are doing.
Let's just be clear. The innovation is not on the computer side of it, because everyone uses essentially the same computer technology, right? Like the minute some new improvement comes out, every company has that chip. So you're not doing something revolutionary to beat out your competition as a Bitcoin miner on the tech side. No. Like you might be able to do minor improvements, but the biggest minor. Oh man. Okay, but on the other side is where you can make gains, right? Is if you have cheaper electricity. Yeah. And continue with your thought.
Yeah, so I mean Moore's law still applies, right?
I don't know who the heck guy was.
So Moore, I can't remember his first name. He was a guy, and he posited.
Didn't he sell men's clothing?
that was his brother. Oh, Herbert. He also had a law, Moore's law of suits, right? Okay. The price of suits will, will cut in half every 12 months.
There you go.
Or will double every 12 months. I don't know. No, but Moore's law basically states that, what does it state now? But basically computing power or, resistors will improve in performance, will double every 18 months. Yeah. And so that has probably actually improved to roughly every 12 months or so. So on the innovation front.
Since when? Since?
I think the 70s, right. 70s or 80s when he came up with this. That's, there's another thing we got to talk about.
Talk about exponential growth.
Productivity and deflationary effects of technology. Yeah. But talk about that another time. But anyways, on the innovation side for the actual mining rigs, like every year, every 18 months, there's a new thing that is coming out, and it's more powerful, and it costs more. But that on that side, that continues to happen. Yeah. So you're right. The innovation on the Bitcoin side, where the companies comes from finding cheap sources of power. Yeah. And, so you can think of one example is in Texas. There's a lot of Bitcoin miners. And not necessarily for cheap sources. I mean, they want cheap energy. But one thing they do is they help stabilize the grid, which is really important. So they use X amount of energy all the time. But they kind of have this agreement with the government that, hey, when we need energy, because our grid is terrible, you guys stop mining so that there is excess, all that capacity that is available, or all that capacity you would use is now available to the rest of the grid,
This
so we
is
don't have blackouts.
so important and so like transformative, I think, in our world moving forward. It's gonna be huge.
Yeah,
I think. So
absolutely.
what you're saying is the current electricity grid
Current.
produces power, but
Yep.
it produces. You have to have a grid that produces more power than what is needed, right? Because you
Yeah.
basically have to assume that, well, okay, if everyone has so many devices in their house, what if they're all turned on at the exact same time? Well, we should have enough capacity at all times to be able to handle that, right?
Yeah.
So you
And you can measure
overbuild.
that on a grid, right? You look at like 5 o'clock when everybody gets home, power spikes.
Yeah. And that's why they have different pricing and whatever else to try and minimize, so they kind of even it out. But
Yeah.
the grid, the people who run the grid are like, well, we got to have the capacity for all of this energy demand. Well, how do you store electricity? We don't really have an efficient way to store electricity so that we can produce it and then store it for a few weeks, and then, all of a sudden there's demand and we got it, right?
Yeah.
So you have to overbuild the grid such that the capacity is there for when demand spikes. Otherwise, you have blackouts and your society just like, I want to live somewhere else because I don't want to have a blackout. Like,
Yeah.
so if that's the way we're running, and now the government's trying to incentivize like electric cars and like whatever heat pumps on electricity. So like we got to really overbuild this grid, but we're wasting electricity there, right? Because if you're producing all this electricity just so you have the capacity at any given moment to have, all these devices plugged in, turned on, what are you doing with that electricity? It just goes, where's it go?
Yeah.
Nowhere. So what Bitcoin does is it says, well, okay, I have a productive use for electricity, and that is mining Bitcoin.
Yep.
So if I can make money mining Bitcoin and I can turn it off and on whenever I need to, when I turn it on, I'm making money. When I turn it off, I'm not. Well, why don't I plug into the grid, and when you guys aren't using it, I'll turn on and I'll start making money. And you can take, charge me for that electricity you're otherwise throwing out the window. And then when you guys need the demand, we turn it off and you can have it back.
Yeah.
That's a creative use of what would otherwise be wasted or stranded and wasted energy.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So
we're a more efficient, like through Bitcoin, we're actually more efficiently using the resources that we already have.
yeah, and so what happens is you can, if you have a big customer, now you can, and they're like, okay, we need energy for the next 5-10 years. You can make
Not
improvements.
like a big customer.
Well, I mean, Texas, everything's big. Wow. I just imagine some big old boy with a cigar. I need more energy. And then he's got a 6-shooter like, pew, pew, pew. Kind of like Yosemite Sam.
Yeah.
That's my impression of Bitcoin miners in Texas, folks, by the way.
We got to go down there, check
See
it
if
out.
that's
for
actually
real.
true.
Yeah.
No, but what happens is if you have a big stable customer, you can make investments in your grid now, because the electricity grid in North America is actually pretty lousy. You haven't invested in it, and it's not reliable. It's very fragile. And so now you can actually have the peace of mind to make some investments to improve that grid, and also increase capacity. And then, so now you have increased capacity. So if you have these agreements with the miners, it's like, guys, you shut off, stop mining for a while. And right, that's like, they're not mining, they're not making money, but there's the understanding that like it's a symbiotic relationship.
Yeah.
And now
we're getting cheap electricity from the grid to power our Bitcoin miners to make money. But in response, or like,
in return,
you guys get a way to sell wasted energy to us.
Yeah, and a more stable grid overall,
and the resources to increase the capacity of the grid and maintain it and improve it.
Yeah,
that's a win-win.
You would think, right?
Yeah,
but no,
unless you read the news.
Crying about it. So that's one example.
Wait,
right?
Another thing is, so we haven't found a way to store energy.
No,
like we haven't found a way. We produce all this stuff. We haven't stored it, but we also can't transport it. Okay, you got another point.
No, this is okay. No, finish your point.
But we also can't transport it very far.
No.
Right? So sending electricity down a wire, like how far can you send it before it's, well, this is way not worth it. Why don't we find a closer source of energy that we can, like, let's find a dam somewhere here we can produce it and send it. So
Hey, this is a family podcast. What's your language?
a hydroelectric power generation plant.
Okay.
Let's find a local source of natural energy that we can tap into and build a society around that. So now you have like all of these conventional, I guess you would call it, ways of developing countries and cities and civilization being upended by the ability to basically produce energy anywhere. Store it in Bitcoin essentially, and build civilizations around energy. So,
So Michael Saylor,
Yeah.
I don't know if people know him, but he's the head of, chair of the board, whatever, for MicroStrategy, software company, but he's like huge Bitcoin guy, shall we say, right? And they have bought, last time I heard they had 180,000 Bitcoin. Like they made the last purchase to like make it perfectly even.
Yeah.
I think they've bought more since then, but he was just proving a point. Like something
I think
like
I read they're raising another $6 billion or something.
Yeah, probably. So, anyways, he has some lecture series out there, and I think maybe even with Robert Breedlove, but talking specifically about this, right? We haven't solved the issue of being able to store energy. And I remember years ago,
as a human species.
Yeah, I remember years ago investing in this little company who, they had claimed to have found a way to store energy in batteries using like barium nitrate or something. Anyways, it never turned out to anything. It was I think it was a Canadian electric car company. I can't remember the name anymore. It didn't go anywhere, but they had this patent for some of this work, and this was like a big thing. Never turned into anything, but this is the big question. How do you store energy? Like for long periods of time, because we produce it and we have to use it. If we could store it, that would be huge. It would game changer.
Store it efficiently. We can store energy in some ways for some periods of time, but there's always that decay,
discharge.
Right?
Yeah. So anyways, Michael Saylor makes the point that Bitcoin is stored energy. And so we don't have 6 hours to like philosophically go into this, but I'll just kind of make that statement and leave it there. But yeah, Bitcoin is stored energy.
And to think about that,
we've
created a way to store energy.
Yeah, and so that seems like kind of a weird statement.
Seems
but
important.
When you, if you really sit down and think about it, that's what it is, because you can now use that energy later on in a financial use case. But we're not going to go into that. So talking about energy usage of Bitcoin, right? So Texas stabilizing the grid, that's one example. There's a lot of stranded energy sources out there.
What do you mean by stranded
Well,
energy?
I'll give you an example. When you do natural gas mining, when you're doing oil mining, a lot of the time you have natural gas, methane, that also comes, because they exist together usually, right? So depending, if you're doing fracking, you're going to get more of that. So that gas is coming up, and it's got to go somewhere. So typically what happens is they don't want to just release that into the environment, because there's guidelines from the government.
Like cow farts on steroids?
Yeah, exactly. It's like a million cars fighting at once.
We could probably tax that.
So there's limits, right? If you're doing this kind of like oil extraction, you can only have certain amounts of emission. So what they do is they just burn it.
So the companies are going out there seeking oil.
Yep.
Because oil's like something they can sell. And the byproduct of this is natural gas.
Yep.
And because they need to deal with it, they just burn it.
Yeah, because they don't want to just release it. That's supposedly harmful.
Yeah.
So they burn it, which releases, turns it into carbon dioxide.
Less bad things.
Less bad. So are you heating up the environment? You're releasing more carbon dioxide. Interesting side note, right? Studies are showing that the Earth is now much greener than it was even 20, 30, 40 years ago. Possibly as a result of...
I don't know where you got that. It's winter. It's
Google
like,
it.
well, I guess it is kind of
No, but overall, if you look at the Earth from space,
okay.
there's a measurable, visible percentage of the Earth that is more green than it was.
Right.
Because, like, what do plants need?
I guess what they're saying is all the ice is melting and now everything is...
No, because the predictions were that we're doing all this bad stuff to the environment. Yeah, desertification. It's not happening. Deserts are decreasing. Because what do plants need? They need sunlight and carbon dioxide.
And we're producing lots of those.
Huh, interesting.
Okay.
So is it really bad? Anyways, that's not the point of this. That's a
well, to get back to this gas flaring thing.
Yeah, so flaring gas, right? So it's like, well, why don't you just, we can use natural gas. Why don't you capture it? But it's cost prohibitive to build the facilities to capture and transport that natural gas. So what some Bitcoin miners have done is said, hey, we can use that to power a turbine, that gas, and that turbine will produce energy.
Yeah.
And that energy will run Bitcoin miners. So this is an excellent use case for Bitcoin mining, right?
So what otherwise would have been wasted energy or stranded, because these oil things are way out in the middle of nowhere, not near civilization.
Yep.
Because who wants to live right beside an oil mine? And it's producing energy that we're otherwise burning. Well, now we can use that. We can convert it to Bitcoin, and we can essentially, as your earlier point, like store the energy in Bitcoin.
So we're being more efficient. We're not wasting it. And if
I guess, what does it mean to
if you're
store
really,
energy
if
in
you're
Bitcoin?
into it, it's better for the environment if you believe those arguments.
Right.
So awesome.
So you're actually
so they're
producing
actually
something.
there's a company that will produce these. It's like on a shipping container, and you got a couple of those. So one is the actual turbine, and then but you can also, there's a use case for these to now not just do Bitcoin mining, but because somebody came up with this. Well, hold on, we can actually power our camp from all this. We can use this turbine to we'll do some Bitcoin mining. We're actually going to power some living facilities for people so they can actually live here. And like, incredible, right? Now we don't need to run electricity transmission lines to these areas and then abandon them once the oil's gone. So it's like a mobile thing. So like all kinds of crazy applications. How about another one, Brent?
Okay.
El Salvador, volcano Bitcoin.
What?
Right? They have power plants that are harnessing the heat from volcanoes, right? You get water, add it to heat, you get steam that powers a turbine.
So why would they not use that heat for something else? Like, why would you just not use volcano heat for powering El Salvador?
Well, so they will, but using it for Bitcoin helps make it more financially viable. So they had, I don't know if you remember the volcano bonds.
Yeah, I heard
that.
But
that was one thing they did, right? And they're well on track to repaying all these bonds. Like El Salvador has kind of transformed over the space of the last 5-6 years. And it's not, this is not just Bitcoin, but this is part of the policies of their president, right? But this is one of the things, and everybody was like, because they really went all in on Bitcoin. And everybody's like, oh, this is, terrible. Well, they've paid back their IMF loans. Their credit rating has improved, right?
Yeah.
Like they're on a good financial track.
Yeah.
And a large part of that is due to some of this Bitcoin stuff. So there's Bitcoin mining will gravitate towards the cheapest, most efficient sources of energy. And there's innovation on the planet.
Yeah. Not just on the grid somewhere or whatever. It's like anywhere in the entire world where you can profitably, find the cheapest source, be creative. So you're basically creating an environment where people are forced to be creative, ingenious, use things that otherwise be wasted or stranded to benefit human civilization. And that's the argument. Is it actually benefiting human civilization, or is it just a waste of time to drag these big computers in the middle of nowhere and burn gas that would otherwise be a bunch of cow farts going in the atmosphere?
Well, yeah, so you have environmental benefits.
Well, just to back that up, was this book says, okay, Bitcoin, a conservative estimate of renewables penetration in the energy mix powering the Bitcoin mining network is 74.1%. So 74.1% at the time of this guy's writing, which is a few years ago, of the Bitcoin mining network is renewables, making Bitcoin mining more renewables driven than almost every other large-scale industry in the world.
Wow.
So you could say, it uses a lot of energy, but it's actually the most, like if you want to make everything renewable energy, well, this is a good use of it, right? Like you can, with a turbine, like the wind blows and then it stops. Well, Bitcoin mining can go when it's good and stop when it's not, right? Like, whereas your air conditioning, you kind of want it to go all the time, right?
Yeah.
Or if you want to do laundry, you don't want to have to wait until the wind's blowing.
Well, and you have to remember as well that you can't just produce energy like that.
I
right?
can. Just so, you got to flex, Mark.
Oh, okay. No, but if you have
hours
not many, I use them all on the podcast.
Oh man.
No, but in terms of electricity generation, it's not like you can just say, okay, increase electricity, decrease electricity.
Yeah.
Right? Depending on the kind of...
Like if you're a hydroelectric power plant.
Yeah, that's a little bit... It's flowing.
Yeah.
But you don't have to... you don't have to use that. So that's maybe not the best example. Right? There's ways of quickly increasing and decreasing, I think. I'm not the expert here. The ability, like you can open up the dam like bigger to get a more powerful flow of water.
Yeah.
Or different, like we're going to shut these turbines down.
It still takes a bit of time, and
it does. But the further you go up the renewable spectrum, the less you can do that, right? You can't be like, okay, let's get the wind to blow because we need more. Like that doesn't work.
Just move those clouds so that the solar panels can charge faster.
Right. So
I got to drive to work in my electric car. Let's go.
Yeah. So coal-powered plants, right? You can get them running or get them to spool down, but that takes a lot of time.
Yeah.
Right? It's not like, oh, we need more energy, let's increase it now. It's like, okay, let's fire up this turbine now.
Yeah.
That's going to take hours and hours and hours. And so it's not, we don't have a system where we can just produce the energy that we want immediately for like a large part of the world. So we are blessed to have a lot of hydroelectric power.
So
it's probably the best power source.
Here's another dimension to this is the political cost. So it's what this book is kind of getting at is that it's not just the energy consumption and the environmental cost around the mining of Bitcoin and supporting the financial infrastructure, right? We can't just compare Bitcoin's mining and energy usage versus, let's say, gold or fiat. We have to also compare like the political cost of the monetary system as well. So you can't just simplify it down to like just energy usage, it's bad. Well, what about...
That's an easy argument to make.
Yeah, what about the energy usage of enforcing the current monetary system and giving the citizens confidence in the money, right? Like that takes a military, that takes a dramatic amount of resources and energy, right?
Well, that's the whole basis for the US dollar, for the petrodollar.
Right.
Right? The whole idea is oil is, and like again, so that's energy. Oil is denominated in US dollars, more or less. And the reason that happens is because the US has a really big stick in the form of like an army or a navy or an air force, right? They have carrier groups, so they can just send that carrier from here to there. And it's a tremendous amount of military power to like do what we say. Or
we will enforce it.
Yeah, we're going to enforce that one way or another.
So the only way the system kind of is resilient to different things is through confidence in the military might of the U.S.
Yeah. And,
like that's kind of what it boils down to, right?
Pretty much. And the fact that it's now a system that is like entrenched.
Right.
And like, okay, we could switch to something else, but that's going to be like a huge hassle and a huge
But then we can't just say, well, Bitcoin uses a lot of energy and ignore the fact that we need the entire U.S. military to enforce the current monetary system. So not only is there the cost of all of like the financial infrastructure that goes in, like maybe the gold mining and all that, there's also the entire military and all of the damage that causes and the cost, which is funny because the costs are generally paid by printed money. So it's like, what is going on here? Maybe that's another podcast. Now we're going in circles.
Yeah. So, yeah, well, like what is the value that, if Bitcoin isn't tangible, you can't hold it. What is the value of the dollar? Well, you can't, if you have a digital dollar, you can't hold that either. What's the value? Well, the value is that it's enforced by a big military power.
Yeah.
And the ability of they say it's the ability of the U.S. to tax, but you
can have confidence that they're going to tax you.
But even like taxation is not the biggest, it's not the biggest source of revenue, right? The biggest source is just printing money.
Yeah.
So, taxation is there. I mean, that's interesting, right? Had this conversation a while ago. Like, what is the point of taxation? Really, it's just to regulate behavior. It's not to raise money for the government, because they're just going to spend money anyways. It's to, like the carbon tax, like taxes on cigarettes.
Yeah.
Right? The whole point is not to raise money for the government. It's just to regulate behavior of the citizens. We don't want people to smoke. We're going to put a huge tax on it. We don't want people to use carbon-based energy. We're going to put a massive tax on that.
I feel like just reading this. I got to just read this because this guy says stuff way better than we can. So this is VJ Boyapati in the bullish case for Bitcoin. So he says, history is littered with examples of nation states whose money and monetary systems collapsed when they were conquered or splintered into fractions. Without a military to enforce geographical boundaries and a police force to enforce property rights, no sovereign monetary system could survive. It is here that Bitcoin truly excels. So he's saying that no sovereign monetary system, so no money that a government produces, could survive without violence, without somebody enforcing the fact that, hey, you got to use this money. At the end of the day, we send out people with guns to enforce the fact that this is money, in fact. But he's saying Bitcoin actually kind of changes that. This is where Bitcoin excels. Well, okay, how does that work? Well, where sovereign monies require an apparatus of coercion to exist, i.e. the state, Bitcoin provides the foundation for a new monetary system where property rights do not need to be maintained by a sovereign. An individual who owns Bitcoin can be thought of as having superior property right ownership in a valuable good that can easily be held and transmitted without the support or sanction of the state. Ultimately, the energy consumed by the Bitcoin network will be proportional to the demand from the world's citizenry to use a permissionless system for savings and exchange and the utility that system affords them. Wow.
Yeah.
Like that. I don't know if people kind of digested that, but
that's basically what we said.
It's a little
longer.
It's a little bit of a paradigm shift from living in the system, thinking the money's sound and good, but realizing that it's actually only really enforced and has the ability to continue to exist through coercion and violence. And Bitcoin presents a unique kind of opportunity for people to kind of take that sovereignty into themselves, I guess. That's another book we got to study, The Sovereign Individual, see if that thesis is actually making sense.
Yeah.
But at the end there, it says, well, the energy consumed by the network, which is kind of what we've been talking about and how bad it is, it's actually just proportional to the demand of the people who want it, right? So if more people want it, there'll be more energy consumed on it, right?
Yeah.
It's the same thing with air conditioning, right? It's like, well, if more people want to cool their houses so that they can be comfortable, more people will do that, like pay for the energy, right? And consume the energy. And that's, more energy consumption equals human flourishing.
Yeah, more or less. But yeah, it's right that the currency, monetary systems can't exist without government enforcement. And so a lot of people in the Bitcoin space, sort of idealists, think that eventually we'll be on this Bitcoin standard and we'll have a much better system and much better money and much better et cetera, et cetera. Like, I don't know if that will happen or if I buy that. Because I think for the foreseeable future anyways, even if the majority of people in the world moved to a Bitcoin standard, I think you would still have governments issuing their own currencies and taxing in their own currencies because they they have the military might to do so. Unless you have countries break down, I think that will always exist. And so you may have a parallel system where you've got Bitcoin plus dollars or Bitcoin plus whatever, right? And citizens, you have this idea that everybody's just going to reject the dollar and only transact in Bitcoin. Like, I can't see that happening.
For quite some time.
For at least for quite a long time. I would see parallel systems kind of existing. And the one with just like worthless currency where, okay, I'll sell some of the Bitcoin to pay my taxes. And, one with an actual sound money. So. Yeah,
it's interesting too, because the Bitcoin mining requires a lot of energy, but it's privatized, right? Like unless a government goes in and sets up all these things, right? They're kind of at the mercy of all these like private individuals who can kind of run around the world, get the cheapest energy and use it, right? Collect the Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
So many little things here that we need to have some experts on to explore. Oh, man.
So, I don't know. Did we, did we cover energy use now?
Yeah, there's a whole nother topic I kind of want to talk about too, but that's probably another whole show, man.
Yeah, for sure.
Productivity gains being swallowed by fiat.
Oh, you know what we didn't talk about was proof of work versus proof of stake.
Okay.
Really. So maybe we should just touch on that quickly,
Okay.
right? Bitcoin uses what's called proof of work to do the mining. And so that means, and to like regulate any changes in it or whatever, right? So that means you have to show, it's like show your work, like in school, right?
Yeah.
You show the work that you actually did to get to that answer. So when you're doing the mining, you're solving complex mathematical equations, and then eventually you mine some Bitcoin as a result of that. Whereas Ethereum, all the cryptocurrencies are proof of stake. Ethereum used to be proof of work. They said, oh, it's using too much electricity. Let's switch to proof of stake, which completely drops that the energy requirement.
So if you need to fall asleep tonight, we'll put a link in the show notes to an article on proof of work versus proof of stake.
Yeah, well, this again, it's kind of important because
It is important. Yeah.
There's actual energy that is used in Bitcoin mining, and that's sort of the point, is that there's value there. Versus proof of stake just means I have X amount of Ethereum or X amount of whatever crypto, and therefore I can approve changes to the network, or I can approve an increase in the total coins in circulation. And so if you have a large stake, you have a large say. And if you have people who have more than a 50% stake in it, they can affect large changes without
And
the permission of anybody
stake
else.
Means like you own it.
Yeah,
You own,
STAKE.
yeah.
Like what's at stake. So that's another topic that we'll discuss sometime. But yeah, people will use proof of work as a negative, and that's tied to the energy
Because of the
usage,
energy
but it's
cost.
actually a positive that is part of the resiliency and the whole point of Bitcoin.
Yeah,
is
yeah.
designed
It's a
that way.
positive because Bitcoin is trying to be money, right? Like you could say proof of stake or a less energy intensive method of securing a crypto network is better, but it might be better for a different purpose, not money, right? Like if you just want to have a really complicated, expensive ledger, then, proof of stake might be a good way to do it. But proof of work, if you're actually trying to make a monetary technology that is superior to gold or fiat or these other options, you really have to have a cost to money, right? Because you're trying to store value in some sort of medium.
Yep.
And we're choosing a medium that is scarce, that's hard to produce, right? We went over that so many times. Like you want the money to be expensive to produce and hard. Well, what's the most expensive way to do that everyone can have access to? Well, like proof of work.
Use energy.
Right? Yeah, use energy. Consume. It's like going to dig in the ground to find gold.
So interesting you say that, because
I usually say a lot of interesting.
I know, that's why I'm here. We talked about central bank digital currencies.
Yeah.
Right? A lot of countries are working on these. And who are they partnering with? Right? They're not inventing their own whole new thing. They're partnering with folks from like the Ethereum space. I can't remember who, Monero, I think, maybe Solana. All these guys, they're all in talks to develop central bank digital currencies.
Because the government can pay them money to,
well, they have an existing sort of structure in a system.
Yeah.
And it's easily controllable.
It doesn't require much energy to enforce or produce.
Yeah. And so just remember that, right? The guys in the crypto space are working hand in glove with governments to develop a currency that the government can control. Not people, not citizens, the government. So,
and when someone else controls money, that means they have the power to devalue your time at will, arbitrarily, whenever they want.
As they do now.
Yeah.
But even on a bigger scale. Like
Right.
instantly, very easily. So maybe that's a good spot to leave it off there, Brent, with...
Now that everyone is frightened, thanks for listening.
Yeah. Yeah, hopefully that was of some value to you and you didn't expend too much energy listening to it. But thanks for listening, folks. And until next time,
Steward your wealth wisely. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Two Stewards Show. If you like my voice better, click subscribe.
and if you like my voice better, click share.
If you like both, give us a 5-star rating.
To interact with the show, feel free to reach out at hello@twostewards.ca.
We will see you in the next episode. In the meantime, steward your wealth wisely.